the interest in handmade goods is on the rise. When I first started out, I couldn't command, which my craftsmanship wasn't as good as it is today, but I couldn't command the prices that I get today. Partly due to the education of our customers, because they didn't know what went into it. You know, I love to hear it when people say, hey, I'm going to have you build this and I want to pass it down to my son or daughter. And that really, you know, that's something that you can't get from a store-bought item. And that's why I think a lot of us put so much time and energy into each individual piece. Yeah, it's the way that we make money, but a little piece of ourselves goes into it because we know that it's gonna be treasured and passed around. You want to build something that people are proud to wear or ride in or carry in their pocket. You know, I still work cattle with a lot of my customers, and it really is humbling to see sets of chaps or leggings or spur leathers or a head stall that's being used while you're out there working with these guys and seeing them put it to use. Not everything's going to be a wall hanging, and I think that's another beauty about Western craftsmanship, or you know, anything handmade like this. It's 90% of it's not going to be hanging on the wall like a fine art piece. I think that's the beauty of it, is you're creating something that people can use on a daily basis, but has its own inherent beauty to it. And it's a sense of pride. I mean, as much pride as I take in each piece that I do, I want the people, my customers, to have just as much pride that they have a piece from me, whatever it may be. I think that's all of our goal, is for our items, our wares, to be considered eventually collector's items rather than, oh, well, I got this wallet, you know, or Bible cover or a saddle. You want its worth to retain throughout the years, if not increase in value. I saw just the other day a pair of spur leathers that I'd built 5 or 6 years ago. They went on up for auction, and they brought more, or as much, if not more, than what something I would build today would cost. And that was kind of, you know, that was a pat on the back. I was kind of floored when they brought what I'd be asking for a set today. I'm Britt, Nance, and I'm a Tandy guy. Well, when I first got into it, I was doing ranch work and starting colts and whatnot, and I kept on having breakdowns with my gear. So I would take my saddles into the local saddle shop to get fixed, and I was taking them in so often that finally the guy that was running the shop, he said, you know, I appreciate all the business you're sending me, but you know, I can show you a few things to fix your own gear. That's pretty much how I got into leather work, was out of necessity, which I always liked the beauty of saddles and handmade gear. So what started out is to get me by, kind of transformed into a hobby, and then that hobby turned into my profession. That spanned over, I guess, 15 years now. So. And here we are. I always wanted to do the carving. You know, once I got the construction down, which everything was built like a tank back then, the finer qualities of leatherwork I didn't really have. One of the guys that was teaching me the construction, I asked him, I said, well, and he was pretty elderly at the time, and I said, well, what about the carving? And he said, well, son, he said, I'm getting up in my years, and I probably don't have the time to show you how to carve. When I first picked up a swivel knife, I had no earthly idea how to run one. I was holding it like a pencil, and then I was so awkward doing that, because initially, I started learning how he'd show me was basically a modified screwdriver, and that's how he had carved for years and years. So when I first got first swivel knife, I had no earthly idea how to use it, and nobody around was really open to showing me. So through trial and error, I started carving, and I ruined a lot of good leather in the process. And when I first started out, I would look in magazines and see little clips of saddles and whatnot, and try to replicate the tooling on that. Didn't have a computer or internet or anything like that, so I was kind of muddling my way through deciphering what tools used for what, and some of them to this day I still don't use the proper way that a tool is supposed to be used, but it works for me. And just a lot of trial and error, and the more I tried to replicate other people's tooling, it really didn't fit with me, so I just basically started over from square one and decided I was going to draw my own patterns the way I saw it needed to be. My style is still changing to this day, and I try to refine it every project that I do or every order that I produce. I'm trying to make the next order better than the one prior to it. So it's constantly changing, just small bits, but it is. I try to tell students that I have that, you know, if you're not learning anything else, you're going in the wrong direction. And I don't figure I'll ever master any of this. I don't think it's something that can be. A good friend of mine from here in Graham, I'd go over to his shop. He'd built me some spurs before, and I was having kind of issues with developing my own patterns. And one day while sitting at his shop, I watched him rolling the engraving block, and all of a sudden something just clicked. From there, what I had been using as my templates or my way of drawing, I kind of threw that out the window and based, I'd say, a good 80% of what I do now in my layout and my carving off of silverwork. I have tweaked them to fit the leather work and the tools themselves, because in silverwork you're actually doing everything backwards. In silverwork you push into a tight curve, where in the leather work you drag out of it. And in silverwork you're removing material. In leatherwork, when you're tooling, you're putting it, compressing the material. So while there are similarities to the actual layout, actually doing it's exactly opposite. So that's why I would get so confused when I was trying to do both of them at the same time during the week, pushing my graver, and then I'm trying to pull my knife, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I would get, since everything is backwards, I would get confused. So that's why I kind of put the silverwork on the back burner for a while till I could kind of refine my leather work. And here we are like 5 or 6 years later, and I'm still doing the leather work. So, when I started, I used to transfer my patterns from a tracing film, like most people do, onto the leather. The reason I started laying out directly on the leather, I wanted to practice more on my layout, and I was basically spoiling myself when I would make a pattern that I reused over and over and over again. And basically it ensures that every project, every order I do is one of a kind, because it's drawn out directly on the leather. There's no copy of it anywhere. So the pattern that you see on the leather, that's the only time that'll ever be done. And by doing that, it actually does save some time. You would think it'd be a little counterintuitive that, you'd think it'd take a little bit more time laying every one of them out, but with each and every one that I did years ago, I got faster and faster, and I could fit it into different shapes easier, rather than copying and pasting and transferring, and I actually like the way it looks on leather when I lay it out on leather better than I do transfer, because when you actually transfer, a lot of times if it shifts a little bit, your pattern will get askew, or your lines ended up being a little thicker. So by the time you draw it out on your tracing paper, then transfer it with the stylus, and then you get to carving it, your line may move a 1/16 of an inch. Well, that doesn't sound like much, but by the time you add those 1/16 or 30 seconds here and there, you start encroaching on your background area, and in effect, it kind of ruins the balance of your piece altogether. You can almost see how it's going to look as you're laying it out, rather than transferring. So I think you do limit the potential of mistakes by laying out directly on the leather, and it's something that does intimidate a lot of people or students I have here. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to ruin this piece of leather." And if I tell them I don't care how long you've done this, you're gonna ruin leather. That's the nature of the beast. If you're welding, eventually you're gonna get burnt. Whatever profession you do, you're gonna mess something up. So you can't be afraid of messing up. You're gonna hold yourself within the little box, your little safe space, or comfort zone, if you will, and you're not gonna really branch out from there. Another thing I think about when I'm laying out are my tool sizes. What tool's gonna fit in this spot? If I'm drawing an element out, it may be too small for a particular tool, so I'll enlarge it a little bit to fit the tools I'm going to use. That's one thing about laying out that I try to instill into people, is to think about the tools that they're using, or going to be using, because you can lay out something that's beautiful, but if you don't have the tools that can actually make the proper impression, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. Pretty much where I find my inspiration, I'll see stuff everywhere. From silver work, I've seen potential patterns on wallpaper, rugs. You talk to these craftsmen, they'll see, you almost eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. Once you kind of get in the groove, you'll see a pattern or something that'll influence you pretty much anywhere. I was at a show in Nevada a couple of years ago, and I was getting ready for a demonstration and just got done shaving, and when I wiped my face off, I noticed a wallpaper. I was like, oh my gosh. So before I went there, I got my little sketchbook and I drew out a little sample of it, of the pattern it had on it, and as I was walking down the aisle, through the hallway, and I saw something in the carpet too, the way their pattern was, and so I drew from there and actually made a couple stamps from those shapes. Traditional styles are the styles that you think of. They had certain aspects about them that you could tell that it was, okay, well that's Sheridan, or that's a Northwestern style. Now you have so much information out there. You've got this boiling pot, so now people are coming up with their own individual styles. So you may have 10 guys that have started out doing the same thing, but throughout the years they picked up different little aspects that they liked, and they've blended it in and made their own style. And I think that, in a way, is, in a big way, is really beneficial to leather carving, leather tooling, that you have all these new takes on old ideas. We hadn't even hit the peak in leather carving, because now you have so much information that it's just ripe for the picking, and you can do with it what you want and add your own little twist on it and make it your own. And then somebody down the road is going to take what you've done, hopefully, and add their twist to it. So it just builds off of itself. It's really reciprocal. The challenges in leatherwork, that's where do you begin or end on that? It's from coming up with your own patterns to finding a market or a niche that you can actually make a living at has been, a good challenge, and I think pretty much anybody would agree on that that's been in this business as a sole profession. When I first started out, I was doing mainly horse gear, but there's 5 other saddle makers in the Graham area, so I really didn't want to step on any toes, and so I started doing smaller items. And the problem I found there was that, I guess in my OCD nature, the same size flowers didn't fit on a wallet as would be appropriate on the saddle. Your flow was limited. The problem that I had was trying to get as much flow on a wallet or whatever as you would have on a saddle. And a lot of people have the misconception that I like to do small tooling. That's not necessarily true. The truth behind it is small tooling fits better on small objects. So it just made sense to me to scale everything down, from the size of layout, the size of tooling, and then throughout the years I've modified a lot of my tools, or probably 85% of my tools, to fit the size tooling that I generally do. And that's kind of, like I was saying, trying to find a niche where you can actually make a profit in this business is as much a challenge as anything. And I kind of pigeonholed myself into the smaller objects, and I don't always necessarily like doing them, but that's what feeds my family, and that's something I know I can keep doing. The other challenge is this past fall, I lost a good portion of that finger, which in carving you've got to have that. There was a huge amount of support when people found out, my peers and whatever, fellow leather workers, silversmiths. There's just an outpouring of help and support, whether it be monetarily or emotionally. It'd have been a lot harder without the help from these peers. I can't say where I'd be right now had it not been for them. I had to train myself to carve and draw, do everything left-handed. So that's been a pretty good bit of a challenge. And now I carve about half with my left hand and about half with my right hand. After I've taught myself to carve left-handed, I tried to train myself, instead of using my middle finger, to kick it out of the way and use my ring finger to carve with. So that's been an ongoing challenge. For the most part, I'm back to my old self now, but that's been one of the bigger challenges, other than actually finding a way to make a living at this. You work so hard to build a name for yourself and carve out a little corner in this profession. I mean, there's so many guys out there that do amazing work, and it's kind of astonishing that with the talent and the amount of people there are doing this, that there's actually enough business out there for everybody. You just got to find the market that suits you the best. That's really one of the reasons that I teach classes these days, is on that same pretense. Is, the more you think about it, the more you're exposed to this. There's just so many different varieties and such a huge amount of craftsmen out there that people fall under the misconception a lot of times that You know, there's not enough work for people, but there is. That's the beauty of it, is about the resurgence of handmade goods. And whether it be silver work, rawhide braiding, leather work, people want something that was crafted by somebody's two hands rather than in an assembly shop. That's what's, I think, beautiful about the leather work is, you know, when I was a kid, the mentality was, you know, a penny saved is a penny earned, and it wasn't so much a disposable society. It's come back around where people want something that's actually gonna last, you know, that's been made by somebody's two hands. And I think, you know, there's special groups out there, like the TCAA, they're actually educating the public what type of work goes into these items, the hours and days. And it's not just somebody order something and, well, how long is that gonna take to build? I wish it were that simple, but it's not. And in a way, I'm thankful that it's not that simple. What may take me 8 hours to build this wallet, it's not that 8 hours, it's the 15 years that preceded that worth of trial and error, tons of wasted leather, ruined leather. We're talking about things that last. I still am wearing the second belt that I ever built for two reasons. It hadn't broke, and it's a way to keep me humble because, yeah, I've made a decent name for myself, but I want to remember where I came from. And every morning when I put this belt on, it's a daily reminder, hey, this is where I started out. It's not pretty, but it's lasting. And I've had it 15 years, and I try to focus as much on the longevity and the craftsmanship to make something last, because it can be pretty, but if it's not going to hold up, what's the difference in that than going and buying a Chinese-made wallet that will last, you know, 6 months and then buying another one? People are actually coming back around to the handmade movement, I guess is what it's been dubbed, and it's a really a neat thing. The few demonstrations that I've done, people don't know what goes into this. You know, you walk them through the individual steps that you've got to do, and educating the public what goes into each piece that you do, that has had a huge benefit to craftsmen, whether it be leather workers, silver workers, rawhide braiders, all of them alike. The more people that you actually educate what goes into this, building all this stuff, it's not just rolled out on an embossing machine. It's, you know, hours and hours or days of construction and craftsmanship, and the accumulation of however many years that it's taken to produce this one wallet or that one saddle. It's not that 40 hours it takes to build a saddle. It's all the years before that went into it. Learning how to sew, learning how to carve, stamp, mold leather. It's I guess a leather crafter lifetime or journey that goes into each piece. One of the reasons I started teaching classes was to kind of give back and help people along their way. I offer floral layout classes and figure carving classes, help newcomers and people that have been at it for a while. If there's something I can answer to help them along their leather journey, so to speak, I'm more than willing to share, because I know the years that it took me of pulling my hair out and banging my head against the wall and ruining leather, while it was necessary for me to go through all that to learn what I know now. If I can help somebody speed that whole process up a little bit so they can be more willing or apt to stick with it. Teaching the classes, it helps me as much as it helps anybody else, because With every class that I teach, pretty much I'll have a new question arise that I hadn't even thought of before. The next day after I get back on the orders, I'm trying to outdo myself yesterday. And that's kind of the way I look at it, is the more I teach people, the more I want to learn more about it. I'm trying to, in the best way I can, push this craft and push myself farther. So the more I teach, the more I'm trying to push myself farther ahead. When I have somebody come back 2, 3, 4 times to a class, they're still learning new stuff that I didn't teach the time before, and they're learning things, little tricks that I've learned from the time they came the first time to this time. It's a good feeling helping somebody out and seeing those light bulbs or those aha moments. That's about as neat a thing as anything. Is you see somebody struggling with something and then show them a little trick, and it's like, oh, I've been trying to figure that out for years, or I could have just come here all along. But it's making all of us that have been in it for a while want to get better. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've seen so much phenomenally good work out there being produced by a wide variety of people, more so than I have before. And it's keeping people on their toes to try to stay ahead of the curve or push the envelope, if you will. I'm Britt, Nance. My business is Nance Custom Leather out of Graham, Texas. I build pretty much anything from horse gear to wallets, watch bands, Bible covers, pretty much anything that you can come up with, I'll give it a good whirl.